Yet what is often created as part of doing? Expectation. To live your life without expectation, without the need for specific results, that is freedom. That is godliness. That is how I live.
You are not attached to results?
Absolutely not. My joy is in the creating, not in the aftermath. Renunciation is not a decision to deny action. Renunciation is a decision to deny a need for a particular result. There's a vast difference.
Could you explain what you mean by the statement, passion is the love of turning being into action?
Beingness is the highest state of existence. It is the purest essence. It is the now, not now, the all, not all, the always, never aspect of God. Pure being is pure God-ing. Yet it has never been enough for us to simply be. We have always yearned to experience what we are, and that requires a whole other aspect of divinity called doing. Let us say that you are, at the core of your wonderful self, that aspect of divinity called love. This is, by the way, the truth of you. Now, it is one thing to be love, and quite another thing to do something loving. The soul longs to do something about what it is, in order that it might know itself in its own experience. So it will seek to realize its highest idea through action. This urge to do this is called passion. Kill passion and you kill God. Passion is God wanting to say, hi. But you see, once God, or God in you, does that loving thing, God has realized itself and needs nothing more. Man, on the other hand, often feels he needs a return on his investment. If we're going to love somebody, fine, but we better get some love back. That sort of thing. This is not passion. This is expectation. This is the greatest source of man's unhappiness. It is what separates man from God. The renunciate seeks to end this separation through the experience some Eastern mystics have called samadhi. That is oneness and union with God, a melding with and melting into divinity. The renunciate therefore renounces results, but never ever renounces passion. Indeed, the Master knows intuitively that passion is the path. It is the way to self-realization. Even in earthly terms, it can be fairly said that if you have a passion for nothing, you have no life at all.
You've said that what you resist persists and what you look at disappears. Can you explain that?
You cannot resist something to which you grant no reality. The act of resisting a thing is the act of granting it life. When you resist an energy, you place it there. The more you resist, the more you make it real, whatever it is you're resisting. What you open your eyes to look at disappears. That is, it ceases to hold its illusory form. If you look at something, truly look at it, you will see right through it, and right through any illusion it holds for you, leaving nothing but ultimate reality in your sight. In the face of ultimate reality, your puny illusion has no power. It cannot long hold you in its weakening grip. You see the truth of it, and the truth sets you free.
But what if you don't want the thing you're looking at to disappear?
You should always want it to. There's nothing in your reality to hold on to. And if you do choose the illusion of your life over ultimate reality, you may simply recreate it, just as you created it to begin with. In this way, you may have in your life what you choose to have, and eliminate from your life what you no longer wish to experience. Yet never resist anything. If you think that by your resistance you will eliminate it, think again. You only plant it more firmly in place. Have I not told you all thought is creative?
Even a thought that says I don't want something?
If you don't want it, why think about it? Don't give it a second thought. Yet if you must think about it, that is, if you cannot not think about it, then do not resist. Rather, look at whatever it is directly. Accept the reality as your creation. Then choose to keep it or not, as you wish.
Who would dictate that choice?
Who and what you think you are dictate that choice, and who and what you choose to be. This dictates all choice, every choice you have made in your life and ever will make.
And so the life of a renunciate is an incorrect path.
That is not a truth. The word renunciate holds such wrongful meaning. In truth, you cannot renounce anything, because what you resist persists. The true renunciate does not renounce, it simply chooses differently. This is an act of moving towards something, not away from something. You cannot move away from something because it will chase you all over hell and back. Therefore resist not temptation, but simply turn from it. Turn toward me, and away from anything unlike me. You know this: there is no such thing as an incorrect path. For on this journey you cannot not get where you are going. It is simply a matter of speed, merely a question of when you will get there. Yet even that is an illusion, for there is no when, neither is there a before or after. There's only now, an eternal moment of always in which you are experiencing yourself.
Then what's the point? If there's no way not to get there, what's the point of life? Why should we worry at all about anything we do?
Well, of course you shouldn't. But you would do well to be observant. Simply notice who and what you are being, doing, and having, and see whether it serves you. The point of life is not to get anywhere. It is to notice that you are, and have always been, already there. You are, always and forever, in the moment of pure creation. The point of life is therefore to create who and what you are, and then to experience that.
And what of suffering? Is suffering the way and the path to God? Some say it is the only way.
I am not pleased by suffering, and whoever says I am does not know me. Suffering is an unnecessary aspect of the human experience. It is not only unnecessary, it is unwise, uncomfortable, and hazardous to your health.
Then why is there so much suffering? Why don't you, if you are God, put an end to it, if you dislike it so much?
I have put an end to suffering. You simply refuse to use the tools I have given you with which to realize that. You see, suffering has nothing to do with events, but with one's reaction to them. What's happening is merely what's happening. How you feel about it is another matter. I've given you the tools with which to respond and react to events in a way which reduces, in fact eliminates, pain. But you've not used them.
Excuse me, but why not eliminate the events?
A very good suggestion. Unfortunately, I have no control over them.
You have no control over events?
Of course not. Events are occurrences in time and space which you produce out of choice. And I will never interfere with choices. To do so would be to obviate the very reason I created you. I've explained all this before. Some events you produce willfully. Some events you draw to you, more or less unconsciously. Some events, major natural disasters are among those you toss into this category, are written off to fate. And even fate can be an acronym for from all thoughts everywhere. In other words, the consciousness of the planet.
The collective consciousness.
Precisely, exactly.
There are those who say the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Our ecology is dying, our planet is in for major geophysical disasters, earthquakes, volcanoes, maybe even a tilting of the Earth on its axis. There are others who say collective consciousness can change all that we can save the Earth with our thoughts.
Thoughts put into action. If enough people everywhere believe something must be done to help the environment, you will save the Earth. But you must work fast. So much damage has already been done for so long. This will take a major attitudinal shift.
You mean if we don't, we'll see the Earth and its inhabitants destroyed?
I have made the laws of the physical universe clear enough for anyone to understand. There are laws of cause and effect which have been sufficiently outlined to your scientists, physicists, and through them to your world leaders. These laws don't need to be outlined once more here.
Well, getting back to suffering then, where did we ever get the idea that suffering was good, that the saintly suffer in silence?
The saintly do suffer in silence, but that does not mean suffering is good. The students in the School of Mastery suffer in silence because they understand that suffering is not the way of God, but rather a sure sign that there is still something to learn of the way of God, still something to remember. The true master does not suffer in silence at all, but only appears to be suffering without complaint. The reason that the true master does not complain is that the true master is not suffering, but simply experiencing a set of circumstances that you would call insufferable. A practicing master does not speak of suffering simply because a master practicing clearly understands the power of the word, and so chooses to simply not say a word about it. We make real that to which we pay attention. The master knows this. The master places himself at choice with regard to that which she chooses to make real. You've all done this from time to time. There's not a one among you who has not made a headache disappear, or a visit to the dentist less painful through your decision about it. A master simply makes the same decision about larger things.
But why have suffering at all? Why have even the possibility of suffering?
You cannot know and become that which you are in the absence of that which you are not, as I have already explained to you.
I still don't understand how he ever got the idea that suffering was good.
You are wise to be insistent in questioning that. The original wisdom surrounding suffering and silence has become so perverted that now many believe, and several religions actually teach, that suffering is good and joy is bad. Therefore, you have decided that if someone has cancer but keeps it to himself, he is a saint. Whereas if someone has, to pick a dynamite topic, robust sexuality and celebrates it openly, she is a sinner.
Boy, you did pick a dynamite topic. And you cleverly changed the pronoun, too, from male to female. Was that to make a point?
It was to show you your prejudices. You don't like to think of women having robust sexuality, much less celebrating it openly. You would rather see a man dying without a whimper on the battlefield than a woman making love with a whimper in the street.
Wouldn't you?
I have no judgment one way or the other, but you have all sorts of them. And I suggest that it is your judgments which keep you from joy, and your expectations which make you unhappy. All of this put together is what causes you dis-ease. And therein begins your suffering.
How do I know that what you're saying is true? How do I know this is even God speaking, and not my own overactive imagination?
You've asked that before. My answer is the same. What difference does it make? Even if everything I've said is wrong, can you think of a better way to live?
No.
Then wrong is right, and right is wrong. Yet I'll tell you this, to help you out of your dilemma: believe nothing I say. Simply live it. Experience it. Then live whatever other paradigm you want to construct. Afterward, look to your experience to find your truth. One day, if you have a great deal of courage, you will experience a world where making love is considered better than making war. On that day will you rejoice.
Life is so scary and so confusing. I wish things could be more clear.
There's nothing scary about life if you are not attached to results.
You mean if you don't want anything?
That's right. Choose, but don't want.
That's easy for people who don't have anyone depending on them. What if you have a wife and children?
The path of the householder has always been a most challenging path, perhaps the most challenging. As you point out, it is easy to want nothing when you're only dealing with yourself. It's natural when you have others you love to want only the best for them.
Well, it hurts when you can't give them all that you want them to have. A nice home, some decent clothes, enough food. I feel as though I've been struggling for 20 years just to make ends meet, when I still have nothing to show for it.
You mean in terms of material wealth?
I mean in terms of just some of the basics that a man would like to pass on to his children. I mean in terms of some of the very simple things a man would like to provide for his wife.
I see. You see it as your job in life to provide all these things. Is that what you imagine your life to be about?
I'm not sure I'd state it that way. This is not what my life is about. but it sure would be nice if this could be a byproduct at least.
Well, let's go back then. What do you see your life being about?
That's a good question. I've had a lot of different answers to that through the years.
What is your answer now?
Well, it feels as though I have two answers to that question. The answer I'd like to see and the answer I'm seeing.
What's the answer you'd like to see?
I'd like to see my life being about the evolution of my soul. I'd like to see my life being about expressing and experiencing the part of me I love most, the part of me that is compassion and patience and giving and helping, the part of me that is knowing and wise, forgiving, and love.
Sounds like you've been listening to me.
Yes, it's beautiful on an esoteric level, but I'm trying to figure out how to practicalize that. So the answer to your question that I see being real in my life is that it's about day-to-day survival.
Oh, and you think one precludes the other.
Well,
you think esoterics preclude survival.
The truth is, I'd like to do more than just survive. I've been surviving all these years. I notice I'm still here. But I'd like the struggle for survival to end. I see that just getting by from day to day is still a struggle. I'd like to do more than just survive. I'd like to prosper.
Now, what would you call prospering?
Having enough that I don't have to worry where my next dollar is coming from. Not having to stress and strain just to make the rent or handle the phone bill. I mean, I hate to get so mundane, but we're talking real life here, not an airy-fairy, spiritually romanticized picture of life.
Do I hear a little anger there?
Not anger so much as frustration. I've been at the spiritual game for over 20 years now, and look where it's gotten me. One paycheck away from the poorhouse. And now I've just lost my job, and it looks like the cash flow has stopped again. I'm getting really tired of the struggle. I'm 49 years old, and I'd like to have some security in life, so I could devote more time to God stuff, to soul evoluting. That is where my heart is, but it's not where my life allows me to go.
Well, you've said a mouthful there, and I suspect you're speaking for a whole lot of people when you share that experience. I'm going to respond to your truth one sentence at a time so that we can easily track and dissect the answer. You have not been at this spiritual game for 20 years. You have been barely skirting the edges of it. This is not a spanking, by the way. This is just a statement of the truth. I'll concede that for 2 decades you've been looking at it, flirting with it, experimenting now and then, but I haven't felt your truest commitment to the game until just recently. Let's be clear that being at the spiritual game means dedicating your whole mind, your whole body, your whole soul to the process of creating self in the image and likeness of God. This is the process of self-realization about which Eastern mystics have written. This is the process of salvation to which much Western theology has devoted itself. This is a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, moment-to-moment act of supreme consciousness. It is a choosing and a re-choosing every instant. It is ongoing creation, conscious creation, creation with a purpose. It is using the tools of creation we have discussed and using them with awareness and sublime intention. That is playing this spiritual game. Now, how long have you been at this?
I haven't even begun.
Don't go from one extreme to the other, and don't be so hard on yourself. You have been dedicated to this process, and you're actually engaged in it, more than you'll give yourself credit for. But you haven't been doing so for 20 years, or anything close to that. Yet the truth is, how long you have been engaged in it is not important. Are you engaged in it now? That's all that matters. Let's move on with your
statement. You ask us to look where it's gotten you, and you describe yourself as being one step away from the poorhouse. I look at you and see quite a different thing. I see a person who's one step away from the rich house. You feel you are one paycheck from oblivion, and I see you as one paycheck from nirvana. Now, much depends, of course, on what you see as your pay and to what end you are working. If the object of your life is to acquire what you call security, I see and understand why you feel you are one paycheck away from the poorhouse. Yet even this assessment is open to correction, because with my pay, all good things come to you. including the experience of feeling secure in the physical world. My pay, the payoff you get when you work for me, provides a great deal more than spiritual comfort. Physical comfort, too, can be yours. Yet the ironic part about all this is that once you experience the kind of spiritual comfort my payoff provides, the last thing you'll find yourself worrying about is physical comfort. Even the physical comfort of members of your family will no longer be a concern to you. For once you rise to a level of God consciousness, you will understand that you are not responsible for any other human soul, and that while it is commendable to wish every soul to live in comfort, each soul is choosing its own destiny this instant. Clearly, it is not the highest action to deliberately abuse or destroy another. Clearly, it is equally inappropriate to neglect the needs of those you have caused to be dependent on you. Your job is to render them independent, to teach them as quickly and completely as possible how to get along without you. For you are no blessing to them as long as they need you to survive, but bless them truly only in the moment they realize you are unnecessary. In the same sense, God's greatest moment is the moment you realize you need no God. I know, this is the antithesis of everything you've ever been taught. Your teachers have told you of an angry God, a jealous God, a God who needs to be needed. And that is not a God at all, but a neurotic substitute for that which would be a deity. A true master is not the one with the most students, but one who creates the most masters. A true leader is not the one with the most followers, but one who creates the most leaders. A true king is not the one with the most subjects, but one who leads the most to royalty. A true teacher is not the one with the most knowledge, but one who causes the most others to have knowledge. And a true God is not one with the most servants, but one who serves the most, thereby making gods of all others. I would that you could this understand. Your happy destiny is unavoidable. You cannot not be saved. There is no hell except not knowing this. So now, as parents, spouses, and loved ones, seek not to make of your love a glue that binds, but rather a magnet that first attracts, then turns around and repels, lest those who are attracted begin to believe they must stick to you to survive. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be more damaging to another. Let your love propel your beloveds into the world and into the full experience of who they are. In this will you have truly loved. It is a great challenge, this path of the householder. There are many distractions, many worldly concerns. The ascetic is bothered by none of these. He has brought his bread and water and given his humble mat on which to lie. And he can devote his every hour to prayer, meditation, and contemplation of the divine. How easy to see the divine under such circumstances. How simple a task. But give one a spouse and children. See the divine in a baby who needs changing at 3 a.m. See the divine in a bill that needs paying by the 1st of the month. Recognize the hand of God in the illness that takes a spouse, the job that's lost, the child's fever, the parent's pain. Now we are talking saintliness. I understand your fatigue. I know you are tired of the struggle. Yet I tell you this, when you follow me, the struggle disappears. Live in your God space, and the events become blessings, one and all.
How can I get to my God space? when I've lost my job, the rent needs paying, the kids need a dentist, and being in my lofty philosophical space seems the least likely way to solve any of this.
Do not forsake me when you need me most. Now is the hour of your greatest testing. Now is the time of your greatest chance. It is the chance to prove everything that has been recorded here. When I say don't forsake me, I sound like that needy, neurotic God we talked about, but I'm not. You can forsake me all you want. I don't care, and it won't change a thing between us. I merely say this in answer to your questions. It is when the going gets tough that you so often forget who you are and the tools I have given you for creating the life that you would choose. Now is the time to go to your God space more than ever. First, it will bring you great peace of mind, and from a peaceful mind do great ideas flow. Ideas which could be solutions to the biggest problems you imagine yourself to have. Second, it is in your God space that you self-realize. And that is the purpose, the only purpose of your soul. When you are in your God space, you know and understand that all you are now experiencing is temporary. I tell you that heaven and earth shall pass away, but you shall not. This everlasting perspective helps you to see things in their proper light. You can define these present conditions and circumstances as what they truly are, temporary and temporal. You may then use them as tools, for that is what they are, temporary, temporal tools, in the creation of present experience. Just who do you think you are? In relationship to the experience called lose a job, who do you think you are? And perhaps more to the point, who do you think I am? Do you imagine this is too big a problem for me to solve? Is getting out of this jam too big a miracle for me to handle? I understand that you may think it's too big for you to handle, even with all the tools I've given you. But do you really think it's too big for me?
Well, I know intellectually that no job is too big for God, but emotionally, I guess I can't be sure. Not whether you can handle it, but whether you will.
I see. So it's a matter of faith.
Well, yes.
You don't question my ability. You merely doubt my desire.
You see, I still live this theology that says there may be a lesson in here somewhere for me. I'm still not sure I'm supposed to have a solution. Maybe I'm supposed to have the problem. Maybe this is one of those tests my theology keeps telling me about. So I worry that this problem may not be solved. That this is one of those you're going to let me hang here with.
Perhaps this is a good time to go over once more how it is that I interact with you. Because you think it is a question of my desire, and I'm telling you it's a question of yours. I want for you what you want for you. Nothing more, nothing less. I don't sit here and make a judgment, request by request, whether something should be granted you. My law is the law of cause and effect, not the law of we'll see. There is nothing you can't have if you choose it. Even before you ask, I will have given it to you. Do you believe this?
Nope. I'm sorry, I've seen too many prayers go unanswered.
Don't be sorry. Just always stay with the truth of your experience. I understand that. I honor that. That's okay with me.
Good, because I don't believe that whatever I ask, I get. My life has not been a testimony to that. In fact, I rarely get what I ask for. When I do, I consider myself damn lucky.
That's an interesting choice of words. You have an option, it seems. In your life, you can either be damned lucky or you can be blessing lucky. I'd rather you be blessing lucky, but of course, I'll never interfere with your decisions. I tell you this, you always get what you create, and you are always creating. I don't make a judgment about the creations that you conjure. I simply empower you to conjure more and more and more and more. If you don't like what you've just created, choose again. My job as God is to always give you that opportunity. Now you're telling me that you haven't always gotten what you wanted. Yet I'm here to tell you that you've always gotten what you called forth. Your life is always a result of your thoughts about it, including your obviously creative thought that you seldom get what you choose. Now, in this present instance, you see yourself as the victim of the situation in the losing of your job. Yet the truth is that you no longer chose that job. You stopped getting up in the morning in anticipation and began getting up with dread. You stopped feeling happy about your work and began feeling resentment. You even began fantasizing doing something else. You think these things mean nothing? You misunderstand your power. I tell you this, your life proceeds out of your intentions for it. So what is your intention now? Do you intend to prove your theory that life seldom brings you what you choose? Or do you intend to demonstrate who you really are and who I am?
Well, I feel chagrined, chastised, embarrassed.
Does that serve you? Why not simply acknowledge the truth when you hear it and move toward it? There's no need to recriminate against yourself. Simply notice what you've been choosing and choose again.
But why am I so ready to always choose the negative and then spank myself for it?
What can you expect? You were told from your earliest days that you're bad. You accept that you were born in sin. Feeling guilty is a learned response. You've been told to feel guilty about yourself for things you did before you could even do anything. You've been taught to feel shame for being born less than perfect. This alleged state of imperfection, in which you are said to have come into this world, is what your religionists have the gall to call original sin. And it is original sin, but not yours. It is the first sin to be perpetrated upon you by a world which knows nothing of God if it thinks that God would or could create anything imperfect. Some of your religions have built up whole theologies around this misconception. And that is what it is, literally, a misconception. For anything I conceive, all that to which I give life is perfect. A perfect reflection of perfection itself, made in the image and likeness of me. Yet in order to justify the idea of a punitive God, your religions needed to create something for me to be angry about. So even those people who lead exemplary lives somehow need to be saved. If they don't need to be saved from themselves, then they need to be saved from their own built-in imperfection. So, these religions say, you'd better do something about all of this, and fast, or you'll go straight to hell. This, in the end, may do nothing to mollify a weird, vindictive, angry God, but it does give life to weird, vindictive, angry religions. Thus do religions perpetuate themselves. Thus does power remain concentrated in the hands of the few, rather than experienced through the hands of the many. Of course you choose constantly the lesser thought, the smaller idea, the tiniest conception of yourself and your power, to say nothing of me and mine. You've been taught to.
My God, how can I undo the teaching?
You can undo the teaching by listening to our conversations over and over again, until you understand every passage, until you're familiar with every word. When you can repeat its passages to others, when you can bring its phrases to mind in the midst of the darkest hour, then you will have undone the teaching.
Yet there is still so much I want to ask you, still so much I want to know.
Indeed. You had a lot of questions. Shall we get back to them?
When will I learn enough about relationships to be able to have them go smoothly? Is there a way to be happy in relationships? Must they be constantly challenging?
You have nothing to learn about relationships. You have only to demonstrate what you already know. There is a way to be happy in relationships, and that is to use relationships for their intended purpose, not the purpose you have designed. Relationships are constantly challenging, constantly calling you to create, express, and experience higher and higher aspects of yourself, grander and grander visions of yourself, ever more magnificent versions of yourself. Nowhere can you do this more immediately, impactfully, and immaculately than in relationships. In fact, without relationships, you cannot do it at all. It is only through your relationship with other people, places, and events that you can even exist as a knowable quantity, as an identifiable something in the universe. Remember, absent everything else, you are not. You only are what you are relative to another thing that is not. That is how it is in the world of the relative, as opposed to the world of the absolute, where I reside. Once you clearly understand this, once you deeply grasp it, then you intuitively bless each and every experience, all human encounter, and especially personal human relationships, for you see them as constructive in the highest sense. You see that they can be used, must be used, are being used, whether you want them to be or not, to construct who you really are. That construction can be a magnificent creation of your own conscious design, or a strictly happenstance configuration. You can choose to be a person who has resulted simply from what has happened, or from what you've chosen to be and do about what has happened. It is in the latter form that creation of self becomes conscious. It is in the second experience that self becomes realized. Bless, therefore, every relationship and hold each as special and formative of who you are and now choose to be. Now, your inquiry has to do with individual human relationships of the romantic sort, and I understand that. So let me address myself specifically and at length to human love relationships, these things which continue to give you such trouble. When human love relationships fail, relationships never truly fail except in the strictly human sense that they did not produce what you want. They fail because they were entered into for the wrong reason. Wrong, of course, is a relative term, meaning something measured against that which is right, whatever that is. It'd be more accurate in your own language to say relationships fail, change, most often when they are entered into for reasons not wholly beneficial or conducive to their survival. Most people enter into relationships with an eye toward what they can get out of them, rather than what they can put into them. The purpose of a relationship is to decide what part of yourself you'd like to see show up, not what part of another you can capture and hold. There can be only one purpose for relationships, and for all of life, to be and to decide who you really are. It is very romantic to say that you were nothing until that special other came along, but it's not true. Worse, it puts an incredible pressure on the other to be all sorts of things he or she is not. Not wanting to let you down, they try very hard to be and do these things until they cannot anymore. They can no longer complete your picture of them. They can no longer fill the roles to which they have been assigned. Resentment builds, anger follows. Finally, in order to save themselves and the relationship, these special others begin to reclaim their real selves, acting more in accordance with who they really are. It is about this time that you say they've really changed. It's very romantic to say that now that your special other has entered your life, you feel complete. Yet the purpose of relationship is not to have another who might complete you, but to have another with whom you might share your completeness. Here is the paradox of all human relationships. You have no need for a particular other in order for you to experience fully who you are, and without another, you're nothing. This is both the mystery and the wonder, the frustration and the joy of the human experience. It requires deep understanding and total willingness to live within this paradox in a way which makes sense. I observe that very few people do. Most of you enter your relationship-forming years ripe with anticipation, full of sexual energy, a wide-open heart, and a joyful, if eager, soul. Somewhere between 40 and 60, and for most it is sooner rather than later, you've given up on your grandest dream, set aside your highest hope, and settled for your lowest expectation, or nothing at all. The problem is so basic, so simple, and yet so tragically misunderstood. Your grandest dream, your highest idea, and your fondest hope has had to do with your beloved other rather than your beloved self. The test of your relationships has had to do with how well the other lived up to your ideas and how well you saw yourself living up to his or hers. Yet the only true test has to do with how well you live up to yours. Relationships are sacred because they provide life's grandest opportunity, indeed, its only opportunity, to create and produce the experience of your highest conceptualization of self. Relationships fail when you see them as life's grandest opportunity to create and produce the experience of your highest conceptualization of another. Let each person in relationship worry about self. What self is being, doing, and having? What self is wanting, asking, giving? What self is seeking, creating, experiencing? And all relationships would magnificently serve their purpose and their participants. Let each person in relationship worry not about the other, but only about self. This seems a strange teaching, for you've been told that in the highest form of relationship, one worries only about the other. Yet I tell you this, your focus upon the other, your obsession with the other, is what causes relationships to fail. What is the other being? What is the other doing? What is the other having? What is the other saying, wanting, demanding? What is the other thinking, expecting, planning? The master understands that it doesn't matter what the other is being, doing, having, saying, wanting, demanding. It doesn't matter what the other is thinking, expecting, planning. It only matters what you are being in relationship to that. The most loving person is the person who is self-centered.
That is a radical teaching.
Not if you look at it carefully. If you cannot love yourself, you cannot love another. Many people make the mistake of seeking love of self through love of another. Of course, they don't realize they are doing this. It's not a conscious effort. It's what's going on in the mind, deep in the mind, in what you call the subconscious. They think, if I can just love others, they will love me, then I will be lovable, and I can love me. The reverse of this is that so many people hate themselves because they feel there is not another who loves them. This is a sickness. It's when people are truly lovesick, because the truth is, other people do love them, but it doesn't matter. No matter how many people profess their love for them, it's not enough. First, they don't believe you. They think you are trying to manipulate them, trying to get something. How could you love them for who they truly are? No, there must be some mistake. You must want something. Now, what do you want? They sit around trying to figure out how anyone could actually love them, so they don't believe you and embark on a campaign to make you prove it. You have to prove that you love them. To do this, they may ask you to start altering your behavior. Second, if they finally come to a place where they can believe you love them, they begin at once to worry about how long they can keep your love. So in order to hold on to your love, they start altering their behavior. Thus, two people literally lose themselves in a relationship. They get into the relationship hoping to find themselves, and they lose themselves instead. This losing of the self in a relationship is what causes most of the bitterness in such couplings. Two people join together in a partnership hoping that the whole will be greater than the sum of the parts, only to find that it's less. They feel less than when they were single, less capable, less able, less exciting, less attractive, less joyful, less content. This is because they are less. They've given up most of who they are in order to be and to stay in their relationship. Relationships were never meant to be this way, yet this is how they are experienced by more people than you could ever know.
Why? Why?
It's because people have lost touch with, if they ever were in touch with, the purpose of relationships. When you lose sight of each other as sacred souls on a sacred journey, then you cannot see the purpose, the reason behind all relationships. The soul has come to the body and the body to life for the purpose of evolution. You are evolving, you are becoming, and you are using your relationship with everything to decide what you are becoming. This is the job you came here to do. This is the joy of creating self, of knowing self, of becoming consciously what you wish to be. It is what is meant by being self-conscious. You have brought yourself to the relative world so that you might have the tools with which to know and experience who you really are. Who you are is who you create yourself to be in relationship to all the rest of it. Your personal relationships are the most important elements in this process. Your personal relationships are therefore holy ground. They have virtually nothing to do with the other, yet because they involve another, they have everything to do with the other. This is the divine dichotomy. This is the closed circle. So it is not such a radical teaching to say, "Blessed are the self-centered, for they shall know God." It might not be a bad goal in your life to know the highest part of yourself and to stay centered in that. Your first relationship, therefore, must be with yourself. You must first learn to honor and cherish and love yourself. You must first see yourself as worthy before you can see another as worthy. You must first see yourself as blessed before you can see another as blessed. You must first know yourself to be holy before you can acknowledge holiness in another. If you put the cart before the horse, as most religions ask you to do, and acknowledge another as holy before you acknowledge yourself, you will one day resent it. If there is one thing none of you can tolerate, it is someone being holier than thou. Yet your religions force you to call others holier than thou. And so you do it for a while, then you crucify them. You have crucified, in one way or another, all of my teachers, not just one. And you did so not because they were holier than thou, but because you made them out to be. My teachers have all come with the same message, not "I am holier than thou," but "You are as holy as am I." This is the message you have not been able to hear. This is the truth you have not been able to accept. And that is why you can never truly, purely fall in love with another. You have never truly, purely fallen in love with yourself. And so I tell you this, be now and forever centered upon yourself. Look to see what you are being, doing, and having in any given moment, not what's going on with another. It is not in the action of another, but in your reaction that your salvation will be found.
Well, I know better, but somehow this makes it sound as though we should not mind what others do to us in relationship. I mean, like they can do anything, and so long as we hold our equilibrium, I guess, keep our self-centered and all that good stuff, nothing can touch us. But others do touch us, certainly touch me, and their actions sometimes hurt us. It's when the hurt comes into relationships that I don't know what to do. It's all very well to say, stand aside from it, cause it to mean nothing, but that's easier said than done. I do get hurt by the words and actions of others in relationships.
The day will come when you will not. That will be the day in which you realize and actualize the true meaning of relationships, the true reason for them. It is because you have forgotten this that you react the way you do. But that's all right. That's part of the growth process. It's part of evolution. It is soul work you are up to in relationship, and that is a grand understanding, a grand remembering. Until you remember this, and remember then also how to use relationship as a tool in the creation of self, you must work at the level at which you are, the level of understanding, the level of willingness, the level of remembrance. And so there are things you can do when you react with pain and hurt to what another is being, saying, or doing. The first is to admit honestly to yourself and to another exactly how you're feeling. This many of you are afraid to do because you think it'll make you look bad. Somewhere deep inside of you, you realize that it probably is ridiculous for you to feel that way. It probably is small of you. You are bigger than that, but you can't help it. You still feel that way. There's only one thing you can do. You must honor your feelings. For honoring your feelings means honoring yourself. And you must love your neighbor as you love yourself. How can you ever expect to understand and honor the feelings of another if you cannot honor the feelings within yourself? The first question in any interactive process with another is, now who am I and who do I want to be in relationship to that? Often you do not remember who you are and do not know who you want to be until you try out a few ways of being. That is why honoring your truest feelings is so important. If your first feeling is a negative feeling, simply having the feeling is frequently all that is needed to step away from it. It is when you have the anger, have the upset, have the disgust, have the rage, own the feeling of wanting to hurt back, that you can disown these first feelings as not who you want to be. The master is one who has lived through enough such experiences to know in advance what her final choices are. She does not need to try out anything. She's worn these clothes before and knows they do not fit. They are not her. And since a master's life is devoted to the constant realization of self as one knows oneself to be, such ill-fitting feelings would never be entertained. That is why masters are imperturbable in the face of what others might call calamity. A master blesses calamity, for the master knows that from the seeds of disaster and all experience comes the growth of self. And the master's second life purpose is always growth. For once one is fully self-realized, there is nothing left to do except be more of that. It is at this stage that one moves from soul work to God work, for this is what I am up to. Now we come upon a very delicate point of interpretation, for this principle of love-sponsored action has been widely misunderstood. And it is this misunderstanding which has led to the resentments and angers of life, which in turn have caused so many to stray from the path. For centuries, you have been taught that love-sponsored action arises out of the choice to be, do, and have whatever produces the highest good for another. Yet I tell you this, the highest choice is that which produces the highest good for you. As with all profound spiritual truth, this statement opens itself to immediate misinterpretation. The mystery clears a bit the moment one decides what is the highest good one could do for oneself. And when the absolute highest choice is made, the mystery dissolves. The circle completes itself. And the highest good for you becomes the highest good for another. It may take lifetimes to understand this, and even more lifetimes to implement. For this truth revolves around an even greater one. What you do for yourself, you do for another. What you do for another, you do for the self. This is because you and the other are one. And this is because there is naught but you. All the masters who have walked your planet have taught this. Verily, verily, I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Yet this has remained for most people merely a grand esoteric truth, with little practical application. In fact, it is the most practically applicable esoteric truth of all time. It is important in relationships to remember this truth, for without it, relationships will be very difficult. Let's go back to the practical applications of this wisdom and step away from the purely spiritual, esoteric aspect of it for now. So often, under the old understandings, people, well-meaning and well-intentioned and many very religious, did what they thought would be best for the other person in their relationships. Sadly, all this produced, in most cases, was continued abuse by the other, continued mistreatment, continued dysfunction in the relationship. Ultimately, the person trying to do what is right by the other, to be quick to forgive, to show compassion, to continually look past certain problems and behaviors, becomes resentful, angry, and mistrusting, even of God. For how can a just God demand such unending suffering, joylessness, and sacrifice, even in the name of love? The answer is God does not. God asks only that you include yourself among those you love. God goes further. God suggests, recommends that you put yourself first. I do this knowing full well that some of you will call this blasphemy, and therefore not my word, and that others of you will do what might be even worse, accept it as my word and misinterpret it or distort it to suit your own purposes, to justify ungodly acts. I tell you this, putting yourself first in the highest sense never leads to an ungodly act. If therefore you have caught yourself in an ungodly act as a result of doing what is best for you, the confusion is not in having put yourself first, but rather in misunderstanding what is best for you. Of course, determining what is best for you will require you to also determine what it is you are trying to do. This is an important step that many people ignore. What are you up to? What is your purpose in life? Without answers to these questions, the matter of what is best in any given circumstances will remain a mystery. As a practical matter, again, leaving esoterics aside, if you look to what is best for you in these situations where you are being abused, at the very least, what you will do is to stop the abuse. And that will be good for both you and your abuser. For even an abuser is abused when his abuse is allowed to continue. This is not healing to the abuser, but damaging. For if the abuser finds that his abuse is acceptable, what does he learn? Yet if the abuser finds that his abuse will be accepted no more, what has he been allowed to discover? Therefore, treating others with love does not necessarily mean allowing others to do as they wish. Parents learn this early with children. Adults are not so quick to learn it with other adults, nor nation with nation. Yet despots cannot be allowed to flourish, but must be stopped in their despotism. Love of self
and love of the despot demands it. This is the answer to your question. If love is all there is, how can man ever justify war? Sometimes man must go to war to make the grandest statement about who man truly is. He who abhors war. There are times when you may have to give up who you are in order to be who you are. There are masters who have taught you cannot have it all until you are willing to give it all up. Thus, in order to have yourself as a man of peace, you may have to give up the idea of yourself as a man who never goes to war. History has called upon men for such decisions. The same is true in the most individual and the most personal relationships. Life may more than once call upon you to prove who you are by demonstrating an aspect of who you are not. This is not so difficult to understand if you have lived a few years, though for the idealistically young it may seem the ultimate contradiction. In more mature retrospection, it seems more divine dichotomy. This does not mean in human relationships that if you are being hurt, you have to hurt back. Nor does it mean so in relationships between nations. It simply means that to allow another to continually inflict damage may not be the most loving thing to do for yourself or the other. This should put to rest some pacifist theories that highest love requires no forceful response to what you consider evil. The discussion here turns esoteric once more because no serious exploration of this statement can ignore the word evil and the value judgments it invites. In truth, there is nothing evil, only objective phenomena and experience. Yet your very purpose in life requires you to select from the growing collection of endless phenomena a scattered few which you call evil. For unless you do, you cannot call yourself nor anything else good, and thus cannot know or create yourself. By that which you call evil do you define yourself, and by that which you call good. The biggest evil would therefore be to declare nothing evil at all. You exist in this life in the world of the relative, where one thing can exist only insofar as it relates to another. This is at one and the same time both the function and the purpose of relationship, to provide a field of experience within which you find yourself, define yourself, and if you choose, constantly recreate who you are. Choosing to be godlike does not mean you choose to be a martyr, and it certainly does not mean you choose to be a victim. On your way to mastery, when all possibility of hurt, damage, and loss is eliminated, it would be well to recognize hurt, damage, and loss as part of your experience and decide who you are in relationship to it. Yes, the things that others think, say, or do will sometimes hurt you until they do not anymore. What will get you from here to there most quickly is total honesty, being willing to assert, acknowledge, and declare exactly how you feel about a thing. Say your truth, kindly but fully and completely. Live your truth, gently but totally and consistently. Change your truth easily and quickly when your experience brings you new clarity. No one in right mind, least of all God, would tell you when you are hurt in a relationship to stand aside from it, cause it to mean nothing. If you are now hurting, it is too late to cause it to mean nothing. Your task now is to decide what it does mean and to demonstrate that. For in so doing, you choose and become who you seek to be.
So I don't have to be the long-suffering wife or the belittled husband or the victim of my relationships in order to render them holy or to make me pleasing in the eyes of God.
Good grief, of course not.
And I don't have to put up with attacks on my dignity, assaults on my pride, damage to my psyche, and wounds to my heart in order to say that I gave it my best in a relationship, did my duty, or met my obligation in the eyes of God and man.
Not for 1 minute.
Well, then pray God, tell me, what promises should I make in relationship? What agreements must I keep? What obligations do relationships carry? What guidelines should I seek?
The answer is the answer you cannot hear, for it leaves you without guidelines and renders null and void every agreement in the moment you make it. The answer is, you have no obligation, neither in relationship nor in all of life.
No obligation?
No obligation, nor any restriction or limitation, nor any guidelines or rules, nor are you bound by any circumstances or situations, nor constrained by any code or law, nor are you punishable for any offense, nor capable of any. For there is no such thing as being offensive in the eyes of God.
I've heard all this before, this there are no rules kind of religion. That's spiritual anarchy. I don't see how that can work.
There's no way it cannot work if you are about the business of creating yourself. If, on the other hand, you imagine yourself to be about the task of trying to be what someone else wants you to be, the absence of rules or guidelines might indeed make things difficult. Yet the thinking mind begs to ask, if God has a way she wants me to be, why didn't she simply create me that way to begin with? Why all this struggle for me to overcome who I am in order for me to become what God wants me to be? This the probing mind demands to know, and rightly so, for it is a proper inquiry. The religionists would have you believe that I created you as less than who I am so that you could have the chance to become as who I am, working against all odds, and I might add, against every natural tendency I am supposed to have given you. Among these so-called natural tendencies is the tendency to sin. You are taught that you were born in sin, that you will die in sin, and that to sin is your nature. One of your religions even teaches you that you can do nothing about this. Your own actions are irrelevant and meaningless. It is arrogant to think that by some action of yours you can get to heaven. There is only one way to heaven, salvation, and that is through no undertaking of your own, but through the grace granted you by God through acceptance of His Son as your intermediary. Once this is done, you are saved. Until it is done, nothing that you do, not the life you live, not the choices you make, not anything you undertake of your own will in an effort to improve yourself or render you worthy, has any effect, bears any influence. You're incapable of rendering yourself worthy because you're inherently unworthy. You were created that way. Why? God only knows. Perhaps He made a mistake. Perhaps He didn't get it right. Maybe He wishes He could have it all to do over again. But there it is. What to do?
You're making mock of me.
No. You are making mock of me. You're saying that I, God, made inherently imperfect beings, then have demanded of them to be perfect or face damnation. You are saying then that somewhere several thousand years into the world's experience, I relented, saying that from then on you didn't necessarily have to be good. You simply had to feel bad when you were not being good, and accept as your Savior the one being who could always be perfect, thus satisfying my hunger for perfection. You are saying that my Son, the one you claim to be the perfect one, has saved you from your own imperfection, the imperfection I gave you. In other words, God's Son has saved you from what His Father did. This is how you, many of you, say I've set it up. Now, who is mocking whom?
Well, this is the second time you seem to have launched a frontal attack on fundamentalist Christianity, and I'm surprised.
You have chosen the word attack. I am simply engaging the issue. And the issue, by the way, is not fundamentalist Christianity, as you put it. It is the entire nature of God and of God's relationship to man. The question comes up here because we were discussing the matter of obligations in relationships and in life itself. You cannot believe in an obligation-less relationship because you cannot accept who and what you really are. You call a life of complete freedom spiritual anarchy. I call it God's great promise. It is only within the context of this promise that God's great plan can be completed. You have no obligation in relationship. You have only opportunity. Opportunity, not obligation, is the cornerstone of religion, the basis of all spirituality. So long as you see it the other way around, you will have missed the point. Relationship, your relationship to all things, was created as your perfect tool in the work of the soul. That is why all human relationships are sacred ground. It is why every personal relationship is holy. In this, many churches have it right. Marriage is a sacrament, but not because of its sacred obligations, rather because of its unequaled opportunity. Never do anything in relationship out of a sense of obligation. Do whatever you do out of a sense of the glorious opportunity your relationship affords you to decide and to be who you really are.
I can hear that. Yet over and over in my relationships, I have given up when the going gets tough. The result is I've had a string of relationships where I thought as a kid that I'd have only one. I don't seem to know what it's like to hold on to a relationship. You think I'll ever learn? What do I have to do to make it happen?
You make it sound as if holding on to a relationship means it's been a success. Try not to confuse longevity with a job well done. Remember, your job on the planet is not to see how long you can stay in relationship. It's to decide and experience who you really are. This is not an argument for short-term relationships. and neither is there a requirement for long-term ones. Still, while there is no such requirement, this much should be said. Long-term relationships do hold remarkable opportunities for mutual growth, mutual expression, and mutual fulfillment. That has its own reward.
I know. I mean, I've always suspected that. So how do I get there?
First, make sure you get into a relationship for the right reasons. I'm using the word right here as a relative term. I mean right relative to the larger purpose you hold in your life. As I've indicated before, most people still enter relationships for the wrong reasons: to end loneliness, fill a gap, bring themselves love or someone to love. And those are some of the better reasons. Others do so to salve their ego and their depressions, improve their sex life, recover from a previous relationship, or, believe it or not, to relieve boredom. None of these reasons will work, and unless something dramatic changes along the way, neither will the relationship.
I didn't enter into my relationships for any of those reasons.
I would challenge that. I don't think you know why you entered your relationships. I don't think you thought about it in this way. I don't think you entered your relationships purposefully. I think you entered your relationships because you fell in love.
That's exactly right.
And I don't think you stopped to look at why you fell in love. What was it to which you were responding? What need, a set of needs, was being fulfilled? For most people, love is a response to need fulfillment. Everyone has needs. You need this, another needs that. You both see in each other a chance for need fulfillment. So you agree, tacitly, to a trade. I'll trade you what I've got if you give me what you've got. It's a transaction. But you don't tell the truth about it. You don't say, I trade you very much. You say, I love you very much. And then the disappointment begins.
You've made this point before.
Yes, and you've done this thing before, not once, but several times.
You know, sometimes this dialogue seems to be going around in circles, making the same points over and over again.
Sort of like life.
Ooh, touché.
The process here is that you're asking the questions and I'm merely answering them. You ask the same question 3 different ways. I'm obliged to continue answering it.
Maybe I keep hoping you'll come up with a different answer. You take a lot of the romance out of it when I ask you about relationships. What's wrong with falling head over heels in love without having to think about it?
Nothing. Fall in love with as many people as you like that way. But if you're going to form a lifelong relationship with them, you may want to add a little thought. On the other hand, if you enjoy going through relationships like water, or worse yet, staying in one because you think you have to, then living a life of quiet desperation. If you enjoy repeating these patterns from your past, keep right on doing what you've been doing.
Okay, I get it. Well, you're relentless, aren't you?
That's the problem with truth. The truth is relentless. It won't leave you alone. It keeps creeping up on you from every side, showing you what's really so. That can be annoying.
Okay, so I want to find the tools for a long-term relationship, and you say entering relationships purposefully is one of them.
Yes, be sure you and your mate agree on purpose. If you both agree at a conscious level that the purpose of your relationship is to create an opportunity, not an obligation, an opportunity for growth, for full self-expression, for lifting your lives to their highest potential, for healing every false thought or small idea you ever had about you, and for ultimate reunion with God through the communion of your 2 souls. If you take that vow instead of the vows you've been taking, the relationship has begun on a very good note. It's gotten off on the right foot. That's a very good beginning.
Still, it's no guarantee of success.
If you want guarantees in life, then you don't want life. You want rehearsals for a script that's already been written. Life, by its nature, cannot have guarantees, or its whole purpose is thwarted.
Okay, got it. So now I've got my relationship off to this very good start. Now how do I keep it going?
Know and understand that there will be challenges and difficult times. Don't try to avoid them. Welcome them gratefully. See them as grand gifts from God, glorious opportunities to do what you came into the relationship and life to do. Try very hard not to see your partner as the enemy or the opposition during these times. In fact, seek to to see no one and nothing as the enemy or even the problem. Cultivate the technique of seeing all problems as opportunities. Opportunities to...
I know. Be and decide who you really are.
Right, you're getting it. You are getting it.
Sounds like a pretty dull life to me.
And you're setting your sights too low. Broaden the scope of your horizons. Extend the depth of your vision. See more in you than you think there is to be seen. See more in your partner, too. You'll never disserve your relationship, nor anyone, by seeing more in another than they are showing you. For there is more there, much more. It is only their fear that stops them from showing you. If others notice that you see them as more, they will feel safe to show what you obviously already see.
People tend to live up to our expectations of them.
Something like that. I don't like the word expectations here. Expectations ruin relationships. Let's say that people tend to see in themselves what we see in them. The grander our vision, the grander their willingness to access and display the part of them we have shown them. Isn't that how all truly blessed relationships work? Isn't that part of the healing process, the process by which we give people permission to let go of every false thought they've ever had about themselves? Isn't that what I'm doing here for you?
Yes.
And that is the work of God. The work of the soul is to wake yourself up. The work of God is to wake everybody else up.
We do this by seeing others as who they are, by reminding them of who they are.
This you can do in two ways. By reminding them of who they are, very difficult because they will not believe you, and by remembering who you are, much easier because you do not need their belief, only your own. Demonstrating this constantly ultimately reminds others of who they are, for they will see themselves in you. Many masters have been sent to the earth to demonstrate eternal truth. Others, such as John the Baptist, have been sent as messengers, telling of the truth in glowing terms, speaking of God with unmistakable clarity. These special messengers have been gifted with extraordinary insight and the very special power to see and receive eternal truth, plus the ability to communicate complex concepts in ways that can and will be understood by the masses. You are such a messenger.